Hello, I'm the Media Wiz, because one art form wasn't enough, and we're back at it again with another commentary. So, in honor of the upcoming That 90's show on Netflix, I decided I would look at the shortly lived pseudo spin-off to That 70's show called That 80's show. This was on Fox in the middle of some other show that ended mid-season. Like a lot of other failed sitcoms, it came at a time where they were looking for anything to replace another show that tanked, so then they did another show that inevitably ended up tanking. I did look up a few things before going into this show. I'm not the world's biggest expert on That 70's show. For me, it's kind of like Friends in that it's a show that I don't think is bad, but it's not really my all-time favorite. It is immensely quotable, I'll say that. I just didn't really keep up with it all that much. I think at best I watched a few reruns from time to time on Comedy Central. But from what I gather, this show actually wasn't a direct spin-off of That 70's show. This all came about because Freaks and Geeks, which came out in the very, very late 90's, that show was apparently getting called That 80's show a lot by fans and critics alike. So they just started spitballing this idea for a show. It's like, oh, well, why don't we just make an actual That 80's show? They apparently got a few head writers from the original That 70's show to come back for this, but this, let it be known, from what I can tell, this is actually not a direct spinoff. Versus That 90's show, which from what I can tell actually is supposed to be a direct follow-up of That 70's show. So that in itself is just confusing. It feels like the name itself is just there for, just to try and catch people's attention. And then you watch it, and apparently it's not even remotely connected to That 70's show. Aside from the fact that they have a lot of the same writers, but that's about it. None of the characters are the same. There's no direct parallel. From what I can tell, there's not even any kind of crossover, as far as my knowledge. The only other selling point, aside from the title, that piqued my curiosity in trying to check this out, is the fact that Dennis from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is in it. So I'm very curious to see what a pre-Sunny Dennis, Glenn Howerton, see how he is in this show. If anything, it's got to be a step up from what he's been doing, because apparently he was in that recent Velma show, and I heard that sucked. Other than the few things I did look up on Wikipedia, I'm going into this completely blind, and those few things caught my attention. The title, and the fact that Dennis is in it. But other than that, early predictions of how I'm going to feel, this could either be generic, like it could probably just be a show that is just like any other sitcom, with just kind of bland characters, and the only selling point is that, oh, it's the 1980's. Or another possibility is that it'll be incredibly dated. Like, it's just going to be throwing out cute winky gags all throughout, like, oh, that's a reference to something from the 80's. Oh, that 80's song we're referencing. Oh, we're referencing an 80's movie or an 80's product. We'll just have to see for ourselves. So, without further ado, this is the first episode of That 80's show. Hey, Dennis.
Oh, this is kind of awkward. You dancing with him, me dancing with her?
No, it isn't. We broke up.
Oh. Well, I wasn't really sure. I mean, when you said you wanted to see other people, I didn't know that meant not me.
I should have been more specific.
It's gonna be one of those sitcoms where the laugh track is just like every other word, just to try and remind the audience this is a comedy.
Hey, is my nose bleeding? Nah, you're good.
Oh, get it? Nose bleeding? Because 80's cocaine? Okay.
I've got bad news. Sophia and I are finished.
Aw.
Yeah, I've got some bad news myself. Kids, Mother and I split up.
That happened
Was that a joke? Oh, and that's the punchline.
Saying it.
What is that smell?
That is the smell of my little entrepreneur.
That's right. I'm making candles.
They smell like death.
Death or pina colada.
Death.
Alright, the laugh track is already getting annoying.
Sister's a big wheel in the candle game. Now you've gone and turned a perfectly good...
Yeah, her and Jan Levinson Gould from The Office.
Right, you need to get over it.
I could be watching that episode of that show instead right now.
Tea.
Hey, Roger.
Hey, glad you're here. So I know these are all power ties, but which one of you says I will crush you in a hostile takeover?
Burgundy.
She's right.
I can't believe this is a conversation. Come on, I'm gonna be late for work.
It's weird seeing him try to play the voice of reason character, because, I mean, I guess he kind of was like that in Sunny, but, you know, if you've seen It's Always Sunny, then you know what a psychopath Dennis is, so it's really surprising seeing him trying to play the more straight-laced kind of guy.
By making a change in your destiny, positive affirmation. I deserve success.
I deserve success.
Is this a positive affirmations tape made by Robot Jones? What the hell?
I deserve a beautiful wife with beautiful breasts. How did I get here?
Look, the robot, and they're playing Talking Heads because those were popular in the 80s. It's like, this is a great song, I love that song, but they're just doing it just because it's like, oh yeah, the 80s, by the way, guys. And we're 5 minutes into the episode, and now they're doing opening credits? Really?
You mind if I put this on?
Oh, the happy sound of Black Flag. You having a bad day, baby?
Well, I'm pretty sure my girlfriend dumped me for a woman.
Happens.
My music career is not a career.
Happens.
And my hip dad wants me to get in the game.
And my mom stopped telling me what to do when I was 17. Of course, I was living with Jim Morrison.
Ooh, that's a 70s reference.
A god who thought my breasts looked like mushrooms.
I like that we're 6 minutes into the episode and they're still doing the credits at the bottom.
I just want to make music, you know? I'm 22 years old, for God's sake. I'm not ready to do the corporate droid thing.
Now, as far as that corporate thing goes, I hear one.
Okay, if the end of this series did not have him go, I'm moving to Philadelphia and starting a bar with 2 guys that were in episodes of Law and Order, then the series definitely jumped the shark. More 80s music, just so you know we're in the 80s, guys. Let's date it as much as possible. 80s music.
You'll both meet somebody. Actually, I did meet
Already did.
Really? Well, what's he like? He's like a she. And she's great. I can't stop thinking about her. Aw, cool. Well, I'm happy for you. Awkward. Katie, I knew you were trouble. First time I laid eyes on you. Okay. Thanks for dropping by. I'm just gonna let myself out.
Sorry I couldn't add any commentary to that. That was just naturally awkward.
All right. I'm not going to be in a place full of tension. Got enough of that when I was sleeping with Credence.
More 70s references. Remember Credence?
Either get along or I'll fire you both.
Oh, boy.
Applause for that, really?
Get it to stand up.
How do you get it to stand up?
That got an applause from some people.
This is your daddy? Love you on Miami Vice.
She's not wrong. Look at the way he's dressed. He's got the jacket with the sleeves rolled up. That is absolutely the look of a background character in Miami Vice.
Look, I'm serious. Now, come on. Marketing's exciting. Now, we've got this new campaign for a great thing called the Gut Whack.
Take the job, man. You've got gut whacker marketeer written all over you.
I'm sorry, could you go sweep out the storage room with your head?
Their whole relationship kind of reminds me of that episode of Sunny where Dennis got made fun of by some, like, peace activists or whatever. And then eventually he pretended to be part of their movement just so he could swoop in and take the leader guy's girlfriend. That's kind of what it reminds me of, like that whole back and forth. She says the thing about like your middle class insult or whatever. Like kind of reminds me. It's like, oh, you look like some weekend warrior douchebag coming in.
I know your type. Straight edge, mainline, weekend warrior coming down here in your cashmere sweater with your moosed up hairsprayed cloth. This isn't just a hobby for us. So why don't you take your phony, suburban, half-ass bullshit someplace else?
That was actually really funny. Again, I'm sorry if I'm making too many Sunny references. I'm just thinking of a better show.
Oh, man. Dynasty represents everything that is good, pure, and true about it.
Oh, another reference. Another 80s pop culture reference. Dynasty.
Guys, do you think I need shoulder pads?
Oh, another 80s reference. Shoulder pads. I just realized, you know who she kind of looks like? She looks like Leah Thompson in Howard the Duck. Like if her hair was just a little bit bigger and poofier, like it was in that movie. That would be really appropriate too, because that movie was 1988.
It's marketing. You write slogans, which is like writing lyrics, except it's easier because they don't have to rhyme. Oh, where's the beef?
Another 80s reference. Where's the beef? You remember this? Remember the 80s? Remember Dynasty? Remember Talking Heads? Remember Where's the Beef?
How you doing, son?
I got nothing.
Well, it's the 80s, so it can kind of be like that episode where Dee and Dennis smoke crack for the first time and get addicted to it. You know what? I'm surprised, though. Only one joke about cocaine, and it was super early on. Oh. Oh, there we go. Another 80s reference. The giant, like, Nokia brick phones. This is starting to utilize all those fears I had at the beginning. I was kind of worried that it would be just nothing but, oh, remember the 80s, the show, and that's exactly what it is. It's like, I didn't keep up that much with that 70s show, but I don't think they were that obnoxious with the 70s references in that show as they are here.
Hi, Corey. How are you? Really?
Well,
Hi, Katie.
I'm just gonna drink my scotch while you hit on my sister.
Look, Katie, I want to apologize. I crossed the line, and I am truly, truly sorry. Can we just go back to being friends?
Sure. I'll forgive it.
Thanks.
Well, that wasn't awkward or anything.
Hi, Dad. Would it be okay if I quit?
Sure, son, sure.
Okay, I guess we're done with that storyline. Didn't even take up the whole episode. It took up, like, the second half of the episode.
Do you have any Miles Davis? You're not ready.
Oh, come on. Who's never ready for Miles Davis?
Wow, if it isn't my little corporate tool.
You can't just come down here with your mainline, cashmere, mousse, coif, hairspray, and start being like a suburban tool.
If you had a chance to go back and do it all again, would you do it any differently?
I wouldn't change a thing. Because even if I'd made it, I still would have been unhappy. That's my nature. I'll take out
God, the laugh track. Like, the occasional times people, like, clap while laughing. It's like, it just doesn't feel real. Oh, wow, they actually have a back alley set.
That's the owner's Harley.
Yeah, I know. I work here. On Tuesday?
Oh.
Oh. Yeah, I took it down. Nice suit.
Yeah, okay, I'm wearing a suit because... You know, could you just admit that what I said made you take your hair down?
Oh, look, you're so important to me. That one little cutting remark from you.
Oh, I can't wait to see these two end up together. Oh, man. That's going to be the romantic tension for the rest of the series. They're going to be that love-hate relationship. Oh, man. And then it's good. The first season's going to end with them sharing a kiss, and then that segues into season 2, and will the relationship continue, and,
Hey, Margaret, we're leaving.
Well, at least we're continuing with, with Talking Heads again.
Why do they get to leave?
Water hold me down and the days go by. Water rolling underground into the pool again. Alright. Oh god, thing during credits. Oh no. Another 80s song. Look, we're doing a cover of an 80s song, guys. Yeah, I know. I'm annoyed by it too.
All right, how much to get this noise out of my house? 40.
Best joke, and it was during the credits. Alright, well, now it's over. Alright, so in conclusion, I don't want to say that was as bad as something like Baby Bob, or Cavemen, or Shit My Dad Says. I don't think it was as bad as those shows were. Shit My Dad Says just kind of felt like it had no ambition whatsoever. Like, it's the kind of show that was literally created just because there was a Twitter account called Shit My Dad Says, and they thought, oh, well, it's getting popular, let's try to profit off of it as soon as possible. And Baby Bob and Cavemen were literally just based off of commercials. They made shows based around commercial mascots, and it obviously didn't work. This, on the other hand, I can clearly tell it wasn't trying to be like that 70s show. I mean, most of the time, like, some of the jokes, I guess, were kind of like it, except less funny. And like I said, I'm not the world's biggest expert of that 70s show. I only watched it a little bit. But even still, that show, it was way more charming than this was. One of the biggest problems with it was, like I said all throughout, it's like, kind of like it is nowadays. A lot of it's just kind of nostalgia. Like, it's just priding people's nostalgia. Hey, remember the 80s? Remember this music? Remember these shows and this fad that was popular in the 80s? And some of them just felt really crowbarred in. Like, the guy on the Nokia phone. What was the point of that? They just did that just so they could have a joke of someone using a giant brick phone, because that's what they did in the 80s. And you can do jokes about the 80s. Like, there's plenty of things you could work with. One of my favorite comedies of the 2010s was Hot Tub Time Machine, the first one, because the second one's not very good. But the first one, it was a movie that took place in the 80s, and it actually used that setting effectively. Because, one, it actually felt like there were some kind of believable people in there, and not everyone was just some generic 80s stereotype. And two, it was actually funny. It was a good ensemble. A lot of the people in it were really funny, interacting with each other. This, I don't want to say that there's too many characters, because, I mean, like, everyone's pretty obvious in who their archetypes are. Main character, who's the dentist guy, and then his sister, and then they have the token best friend, and, the main character has an ex, or a potential love interest, and then you got the kind of cranky, or, like, kind of smart-ass adult figures, which, that was the most similar thing to that 70s show, and that's actually something that they're bringing back in that 90s show. They're getting the parents to come back and now they're grandparents, so at least it does that. It did fall into one of my biggest fears with the show, and that it would just become nonstop, hey, remember this thing from the 80s? And while it's not as obnoxious as something like a Seltzerberg parody movie, it does feel kind of lazy. Like, I mean, and I was surprised by the lack of cocaine jokes. I mean, maybe it's because it wasn't like a TVMA show. Maybe they had to pull back a bit. But there was at least one. It was at the very beginning. They had a joke about somebody cleaning their nose and trying to make sure they weren't bleeding. So, yeah, I mean, there was one cocaine joke in this thing in the 80s. But this was just one episode, so who knows? In its entire 13-episode run, I think, as long as it lasted, however long it lasted, I'm assuming there's probably a small handful of cocaine references. And that whole, him getting a job subplot begins and ends in about 5 minutes. And then the whole thing with, it just felt very scattershot. It felt like, I mean, and yeah, it's the first episode, so maybe it slightly got better in terms of its structure in some of the later episodes. I highly doubt it, though. because it's such a shortly lived series. And the awkward stuff with the ex-girlfriend, like that, I mean, the show takes place in the 80s, and the show came out in 2002, so it was a very awkward time for them to write those kind of things into these shows, but they didn't do it very well. Like, even as a joke, it wasn't that funny. I swear to God, in the first 5 minutes, like, not only were they laughing, they were applauding, like, every other thing. And it's like, okay, they had to have been holding up signs that are just like, applaud! I guess it's better than some of the, like, later Nickelodeon sitcoms and like some of the Chuck Lorre sitcoms where all they do is they just add the laugh tracks in post. But like I could tell that was a real audience, but I can't tell if that's better or worse. So yeah, for all I know, maybe that 90s show will be a step in the right direction compared to this. I do find it interesting that people apparently remembered the fact that there was an 80s show, so they just decided to say, screw it, let's not make a proper That 80s Show that is a sequel series to That 70s Show. Let's just skip that generation and go straight to the 90s with That 90s Show. That's kind of funny. It's not as bad as the stupid sitcoms that were based on a Twitter account or commercials. And it's not a slap in the face to a beloved comedy like the Ferris Bueller sitcom, which just felt really I mean, the first few minutes, they straight up say, oh yeah, Ferris Bueller, played by Matthew Broderick, that's not the real Ferris Bueller. Hashtag not my Bueller. This is just the worst thing about the show is that just the humor relies way too heavily on, remember the 80s? And I mean, like, hey, some of the music was great, but the show itself, most of the jokes, half the time I was just remembering episodes of Sunny that I could be watching instead. That goes to show. So my full recommendation, just watch reruns of That 70s Show, or maybe watch the complete series if you have a streaming service that has it, or if you have it on box set or something. Just watch that, or watch Hot Tub Time Machine. That's a better 80s related comedy. Or hell, just watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That's a better use of Glenn Howerton than this show. Like, he gets to be really funny in Sunny. So, yeah, those are my recommendations. Either watch That 70s Show, Hot Tub Time Machine, or It's Always Sunny. That 80s Show, it's kind of a weird, forgotten experiment, I guess. Yeah, I think that's the right way to put it. Alright, so that does it for this commentary. Tune in next week. We're going to be talking about a web animation. It's a pilot, once again, kind of like some of the other web animations I've reviewed before. This time we're going to be looking at the Western-themed web animation pilot called Cliffside. But until then, guys, I'm the Media Wiz, because One Art Form wasn't enough.